do a mic check for us, please, mate.
Mic check 1, 2, 3.
And then Izzy for me.
Mic check 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, you good to go, mate?
Cool. Welcome to the most recent episode of the Beyond the Numbers podcast, proudly supported by Nubria. And today on the show we've got Issy Panton. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Would you mind introducing yourself very quickly for anybody that doesn't know?
Hi, my name's Izzy. I am the founder of Corporate Agony, and I give free career advice every single day across Instagram and TikTok, and I'm looking to build a bigger business out of that at the moment. And I'm also, by day, a commercial lead at The Overlap. So I work across Gary Neville's media company in sponsorships and partnerships, looking after all of our existing clients and new clients.
Brilliant. So I've actually been following you for a little while. I've seen loads of your content. You're obviously a careers expert. You've got loads of interesting takes on how to get pay rises, how to navigate the corporate world, how to progress in your career, all these different things. So obviously want to go into that. But to start off with, if we focus on yourself and go back to the beginning of your career, have you always been this person from the moment you left uni, where you were very driven, know what you wanted? That's how you come across now.
Yeah.
Was that you a few years back?
Definitely very driven. Knowing what I wanted is maybe a different story, because I think you just fall forward and you see what happens. But I still don't know what I want now, to be honest.
I suppose it depends on the definition, doesn't it?
And it
like, I'm
changes.
sure you didn't necessarily want what you're doing right now,
Yeah,
but
I've got here and I love it at the moment, and this is probably not forever either. But I was always very driven. I went to university, I went to Northumbria, and I studied business with HR just because I didn't know what else to study, and I wanted to move away from relatively strict parents and the small town life in Somerset. And I went there, and as part of the degree we had to do a placement year, which in retrospect was like really, really important. It doesn't feel as formative at the time as it was, but I did a placement year at Enterprise Rent-A-Car in Bolton. I came back home for it. And part of that job was like looking after B2B clients. So say you got a corporate company that could rent cars on their corporate account, like you had to spot those accounts and then look after them thereafter. And there was just one account that I always took special care of. There's lots of accounts I took special care of, but there was one that I know that they were impressed by me all the time. And then they offered me a job for the minute that I handed in my dissertation. So I went into final year knowing I had a job lined up, which I think is like quite rare really in that context. And then it kind of unlocked a drive, because I was always working towards my next goal. I had that job lined up. I did that only for 6 months because it was amazing, but the culture was like a tiny little bit boring, and I needed a bit more of a social at work. And then that unlocked a new opportunity, and it just went from there. So it's weird how it compounds. And when you're at the start of your career, most people would say that they can't picture what 10 years after that looked like. But I remember driving to work, I'm maybe 22, 23, and thinking I'm going to be a director by the time I'm 30. And I didn't know what that even meant. And I didn't know in what job or what role or what industry, but I knew that benchmark represented corporate success. And I did it within, 2 years after that, 3 years after that. So it sounds really woo-woo, but all the way through my career to date, I've always spoken out loud what I want to achieve or think I can achieve, and I've never had a limit on myself or a ceiling on myself of I don't think I'm good enough for this or I don't think I'm good enough for that. And it compounds with genuine drive and ambition, and I just end up where I want to be, basically in rooms that I want to be in.
Where do you think that confidence has come from to kind of go for what you want in each position you've been in? Where do you think that comes from?
I definitely had parents that nothing was off the table, like nothing was off the cards, and they would always tell me that I could do anything I want to. I vividly remember my dad saying you can be anything you want to be all the time. I think how your parents talk about you when you're in earshot is so important when you're young. Do you remember, like, if you used to hear your parents talk really positively about you, you'd be like they're talking about me, and it would be absolute flattery. But when I went to university and I did my dissertation, I realised how good I was at writing, or how much I enjoyed writing. I got better at it, and my granddad was reviewing it for me because he likes writing, and he used to just tell me how smart I was and how well written things were, and how I was one of his smartest grandchildren. And I think it just builds you up, and those affirmations just really got in my head to the point where I was affirming myself, and I didn't really need to hear them off anyone anymore.
Was you a confident child, or was you a bit more shy?
I'm the eldest daughter, 3. Yeah, I was shy, when most kids are, but from an early age, like, I do remember having to ask for the bill and not wanting to do it in the restaurant, but like doing it because my parents made me do it. And those tiny experiences actually shape you massively. If you know how to talk to adults when you're a kid, and I always did, that impact is quite profound as you get older. And I think that translates to now, where our CEOs would walk in the room, even now, any job I've ever had, and I never felt any way about that. I never would be nervous or scared that this adult who was more senior than me with a bigger title was walking in, even if they owned the company. And I'd see people around me crumble and I think, oh, they're just a normal person. And I think it debunked that hierarchy really quickly because I learned how to speak to adults when I was young. And
That's really funny. I've never heard it put like that, but that
Yeah.
is literally almost the same thing in a different scenario. An adult walking into the room when you used to be around kids compared to like the CEO walking in the room when you're with your co-workers. Yeah,
like,
it's very similar.
You feel juvenile.
And if you can remain the same person as you was when they weren't in the room,
Yeah.
it's a good skill to have.
I'm sure some people, some CEOs, some board members, especially if I ever presented at board, which was quite regular for me since I was pretty early 20s, they'd probably look at me and think, God, she's confident. And some people would probably see that as something that's really good, and other people would think, well, she's not earned that audacity, if you will. And I look back and I know the people that would shudder when I walk in the room and not feel any way about being in that room full of people. But I just think we're all the exact same, and you should treat the earliest apprentice as the same way you treat as the biggest, longest serving employee. And I've never faltered in that. I treat everyone the same way.
And I think if you're confident and that doesn't change in front of certain people, at least they know who you are.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most key things, isn't it, really?
I think because of LinkedIn in particular, I post quite regularly on there until the last week. I don't know what's happened. But everyone that meets me in real life at an event will say, oh, you're actually consistently the same person online as you are. And it's like a lot of people feel that they need to flex a persona or a personality depending on the rooms, and that room could be physical or digital, whether that's a different app or a different company. I've just literally always been myself, and that doesn't work for me sometimes. Sometimes I stand out like a sore thumb, but I'd rather that than pretend to fit into a place where I'm not really being myself.
This isn't where I was expecting the podcast to go right away, but I do think it is a superpower when you can actually be that same person. It's a more recent thing because obviously online personas and offline personas haven't been a thing for that long, but I do think if you can back up who you are online in person, it is a real superpower.
Yeah.
I was at a networking event recently, and it was an event where I excelled because I felt like I could do it all in person that I've been kind of saying online. And I did meet a lot of people that I know online, and they just weren't that same person.
That happens to me all the time.
And it was a real like turn off in a way.
I know.
Like it just made me think I need to be in these situations more where I can excel.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the online world, some people do excel, and ultimately they need to be in that world to excel.
Yeah.
So if you can do both, you should be using it to your advantage.
I know the online-offline context is a new thing, but I suppose you could liken it to who you are with your friends and who you are at work. I've been quite lucky to work in cultures that were pretty informal and a bit more lenient than like, I don't know, your big four accountancy firms or your legal firms, but that meant that I was like working with people that felt like friends a lot of the time. So actually if you met me at Albert Schloss or you met me at work, I was consistently the same, and I think that just translates to the internet now. Can you keep showing up as yourself? Because if you can't, then you're going to come unstuck a little bit.
I also think if you're the same person all the time, it means you're always networking.
Yeah.
So even if you meet someone at Albert Schloss, you could get an opportunity from that, just like you would in the workplace.
Oh, my friends would turn around and say, why are you speaking to him about LinkedIn? Stop speaking to that person about their personal brand. Like, no one cares. You're so drunk. I can't help it. It's just who I am.
So if we go back then, so your career, where would you say the key moments so far have been? Because it seems like you've really excelled quick, but also not been afraid to move when needed, which sometimes is necessary, it seems, to progress quicker.
I don't have this warped loyalty to a company, and a lot of people feel, oh, this company have looked after me. Yeah, because it suited them to, because you probably performed, because culturally you added value. But if that company was struggling, they would have let you go. So I've never felt I owe a single company anything. Absolutely, loyalty pays off. I've worked for Gary for 4.5, nearly 5 years now. So like there's value in staying with people and with companies, but I never put them on a pedestal, and so I never thought I never feel like I owe anyone anything. So that informs my moves. When I was ready for me to move, I would be really realistic and rational. I would look at the market and think, am I going to get a better job? Is it the right time to move now? Do I have my own personal milestone, like trying to get a mortgage, which would mean moving would be ridiculous? So like I've always been in tune with what's going on around me, and just knowing that each move should be like a piece of chess rather than knee-jerk reactions. And I've definitely had 2 of those that did not pay off. But in the grand scheme of things, we're all going to make some bad moves in our career. But it's little things like I worked at Enterprise Rent-A-Car in a placement year, which most people would say is like insignificant. But I knew that sounds global. It's a global brand. They have a massive presence across the world. And then I worked at an IT hosting provider in the Gap I worked at this Thermavane company, that the client from Enterprise Rent-A-Car, who had clients in America, travelled America for a bit for those 6 months. And then I went to work for UK Fast, and I remember one of the rationales behind why I wanted to work there in my interview was I really wanted to work for a UK company with a big culture and a UK client base. After that job, I went to work at a company called PHMG that had an international base. So when I was there, I was thinking, how can I tailor what I've done to suit this? So then I would talk about my Enterprise Rent-A-Car client base and how I've just had some national experience, but I'm looking to bridge back into international experience. So I really know the themes through my career, but I'm a generalist, and I'm not afraid to say it. I don't try and be a specialist. I'm never going to perform neurosurgery. I'm never going to save your dog's life. I am a generalist in all senses. So I've learnt to master the art of absolutely shouting about myself, and people don't like that. People don't like to hear that if you shout the loudest you get heard, but it's the absolute truth. So it's how I've navigated every step, really. But in terms of the biggest milestone, which was your question, I think it was having the confidence on maternity leave to leave UA92 and decide that I was going to go freelance and start my freelance work up, because old me was so financially risk averse that would never have been a consideration, especially with a young child. But I'd just built such a network behind me that I knew that if it didn't work out, I could find another job. And it turned out that I ended up getting a new job at the Overlap, doing 3 days there and keeping my freelance work running alongside. So it turns out I'm working more than ever. But just having the confidence to back myself, for me, was the biggest milestone I've ever had in my career, because since I was very young, I knew that one day I wanted my own thing. And whether that was an empire or just a little bit of passive income on the side, I didn't care. I just wanted to have that control over my career. And the fact that I took that risk on maternity leave it's astounding. If you'd told 20-year-old me I was going to be doing that.
When you was at uni and you were studying business, was it to have your own business, or was it to work within businesses, do you think? Or was it just leaving it open?
I think my dad's like a serial entrepreneur, successful. Sometimes business was tough, successful again, business was tough. And that volatility always scared me a little bit. And every entrepreneur you ever speak to tells you that it's really, really hard. So I knew when I studied business that, to be clear, when I was studying business, I wasn't necessarily learning business. I was just there because it sounded right for what I wanted to do next. But when I was studying it, I did think I would work for big companies. I'd work my way up and I would become a CEO. That was like my one-track mind. And then as my financial education has improved over time, and my financial literacy, and seeing how companies can treat people really well or really poorly, that's what's opened my eyes up to having my own things. I might work for someone till the day I retire, but so long as I've always got my own thing on the go as well, I'll be intrinsically rewarded. If I feel as though all my eggs are in an employer's basket, and that could just look like being the CEO but having equity, so I feel like I've got my own personal investment in the business. If I feel like my eggs are in one person's basket and I'm not backing myself, then it goes against everything I've learnt about financial education and how we should pay ourselves first and look after ourselves. So the answer was no, but over time I've realised more and more how important it is.
What are your top 3 skills? You said you're a generalist.
Yeah. And that used to be, I used to see that as a bit of a weakness. I used to think, what am I good at? I used to say to people, what am I good at? And they'd say, you can talk to anyone. And I'd be like, that's not a skill, that's not a strength. But the older you get, you realise actually that's huge, pretty fundamental. So being able to talk to anyone, I think as a leader, I can drive a high-performing team with empathy. So perception of a high-performing team is like Wolf of Wall Street, blah, blah, blah. But like my emotional intelligence with my team has got me in trouble a lot of the time because, you know, senior leaders would think I was too friendly. But I've always led with friendship, and people's always worked hard for me and been really honest with me. So talking, leading people, and solving problems. And solving problems sounds so trivial, but I love to go to work now when something's broken, because fixing it like brings me so much joy. When you're performing really high all the time, you get very little recognition compared to when something is absolutely battered in the business and you're the one that saves the day. So those 3 things, which if you told me 10 years ago those were my 3 skills, I'd be telling Josh on this podcast, I'd say they're shit, you better get some better ones. But as I get older, I realise they're class skills to have, and I can apply them to most things.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually potentially say those 3 for myself, but I'd also say they're the 3 most valuable, because the first one, talking to people, for me, is sales. Just rebranded and reframed, which is for me maybe the number 1. Maybe problem solving is, it depends which one. Like as a business owner, maybe going out and getting business way sales, but then as a business owner in the way of actually running the operations, problem solving is probably the number 1. So no, the kind of things that are seen as generalist skills, but I feel like the
Yeah.
best business owners need to be generalists.
And sales and problem solving are interlinked for me because you're either finding pain or pleasure. So if you're finding pain and fixing it, then you're solving a problem. If you're enhancing my life by selling me a product, you're solving a problem I didn't know I had. So they are the same skill in a way. But definitely I think the foundation is having the confidence and the extroversion, or learning the way in which to speak to people. That's what sets you apart.
Do you think you're a natural leader, or have you had to develop that?
I think it's a tough question because I have this belief around leadership that some people absolutely have it and other people don't. And people that don't, the people that fundamentally don't have it will spend all their life pursuing it and never quite get there. And that's quite a strong thing to say, but I do think it's a bit nature versus nurture. But then I think there are circumstances and environments that really lean themselves to practicing leadership from a really early age. One of those things is sports, like playing netball since a kid and having teams around me. That's a really good lesson in leadership without you even realising it. I've found that the best leaders are never ones that wanted to say, I'm going to be the best leader ever, I'm going to be the biggest leader, I'm going to earn the most money through leadership. They just had a natural affinity for people and did well. I find that the worst people in management are the ones that are like, I want to be a manager, I want to manage a team, I want to have people reporting to me. That's the wrong mentality.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So I think there's value in talking about management as a trajectory, in understanding that there's people management progression, that's very valuable, but there's also process management where you can progress, and project management where you can progress, and product management where you can progress, but we always glamorise managing a team of people. I have one colleague in my team at the moment. It's the happiest I've ever been. The happiest I've ever been. I could think, oh, this is the smallest team I've ever had at the height of my career, but actually this is where the team needs to be right now, and I'm absolutely loving it. So wearing leadership as a badge of honour by measuring how many direct reports you have will always be the sign of a bad leader, if you ask me.
I think as well, leadership is sales again.
Yeah.
You've got to win people over.
Corral
You've got to have people
people.
care about your opinion. You
Yeah.
got to have people trust that you kind of are leading people in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's like sales again, where it's not just about speaking the loudest. It's about knowing when to step in,
Yeah.
when to stay out of it. Because
Yeah.
growing up, I always thought, and I always would have recognised a manager by, oh, they're good at telling people what to do.
Yeah.
But often they're the worst managers because
Yeah.
they don't have the emotional intelligence to know when not to tell
Yeah.
or when to change their
on
leadership
them.
style for the
Yeah.
individual.
Yeah.
Like just being able to tell someone what to do is it's good in a way because it's better than not stepping in.
Yeah.
But then you can actually make things 100 times worse.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like I said, if you don't have the emotional intelligence to go with that and have, you've got to be able to have hard conversations,
Yeah.
but have the emotional intelligence to actually know how and when to have them.
Yeah, I will say I'm not a perfect leader by any stretch. I'm not trying to say that people are naturally gifted at leadership and therefore perfect. I have horror stories recalling some of the things that were culturally the norm in some of the business I worked for. Doing 100 hours a day stood up without your chair 10 years ago was like normal. When I see someone in the street that used to work in one of those teams and they're like, remember when you took my chair? Mortified. But like culture is changing when it comes
absolutely.
to sales and leadership. So my leadership style has evolved significantly. But the one thing that was true of me 10 years ago and now was I always did sincerely care about how people were getting on at home and at work. And most people would share that with me because I actually cared about how the rest of their life was. So
Yeah.
definitely had some lessons in leadership. And I do think it's difficult to be a good leader in a bad culture because you are limited by the cultural, premises of where you are. But yeah, it's getting better.
So if we start to lean into your position as a careers advisor, in a way, aren't you, at the
Yeah.
moment, with all your content that's going out and people are really responding to it. From your own experience, have you more often been headhunted or have you more often got an interviewed and proactively gone and got a new position?
Firstly, if anyone's listening that's a careers advisor, people get upset that I'm labelled as that because I'm not a traditional careers advisor that's done the quals. I just think my advice is resonating at the moment because people don't know how to access career advice and because I've walked the walk now while I'm talking the talk.
Well, I'm not calling you a careers advisor as the title. I'm calling it as your giving career
that's
advice.
my industry,
Yeah,
I suppose,
absolutely.
my profession, if you will. So my last job I got based on the work I'd done before, so that's network. The job before I did apply for, but I met a lady at a wedding 2 years prior. She was the director of marketing. We got on very well. I asked if she thought I'd be a good fit, whether it was worth applying. She said, yeah, put in a good word for me. So like, I'd say maybe the last 3 jobs I've gone for, maybe 4 have been as a result of network. I've been like approached for several jobs, almost like very regularly because of LinkedIn, thankfully. But those offers are always never as compelling to me as the ones that come through an internal referral or someone that's spoken my name in a room full of opportunities, because I know that someone's heard about something and thought she would be really good there. I don't know, I like them a bit more than a faceless recruiter, if you will, reaching out to me.
So if we go into some of your best advice that I've seen recently, may I elaborate on those? What would be your top tips for performing in an interview in a corporate situation, would you say? If we go into the top tips, but also the biggest no-nos that people maybe often do, what would you recommend there?
Top tips are just all really rooted in preparation. I think most people are drastically underprepared because it's such a big ask to prepare so much for one interview when you might not get it. But I think people need a mindset change there, whereby they look at that one interview, but it could be, you know, that could be a first stage, second stage, third stage offer. And similarly, you could have 10 more interviews in the same industry or profession the week after. So I think people need to spend a lot more time on their preparation than they do, because it comes unstuck very quickly when someone hasn't prepared and they fly by the seat of the pants. And it upsets me when I see that, when I know that someone has potential but they haven't prepared, because this job market is so tough that to waste that opportunity after you've done probably 100 applications is sad. So definitely preparation. I think people focus on the perfect answer, but I don't think you can get a perfect score in an interview. You can in some infrastructures like the NHS and so on, but you can't get a perfect score in an interview, but you can make people feel really good about themselves. So going in and focusing on the sort of soft skills, if you will, the interpersonal skills, is just as important as waxing lyrical in your answers. And then one thing that people don't do, because it's probably a bit stalkery, but I do it every time, is social engineering. And every interview I've ever had, the person in the room, I know about them. I know who I'm meeting. I know one little anecdote, maybe 3 anecdotes that I think we could potentially overlap on. And I'm going to lean into it. An example that I always give, and I hope this man never listens to this podcast, is that I was going into an interview and I knew they'd ask me what I get up to in my free time. And I like to travel. And I'd stalked him and I'd found his Instagram was public and he'd gone to Venice very recently. So when they said, what do you like to do in your free time? I said, oh, I love to travel. I think I'm going to travel to Venice next. That's on my list. And he was like, I've just been to Venice. I was like, no way. And I know that sounds so serial killer vibes, but affinity bias is like one of the biggest, I think, differentiators in if you get the job or not. Someone will root for you so hard, even if the rest of the room say she's not right, if they felt a connection.
Yep.
So leaning into that personal, like the personal brand, the stalking on LinkedIn, people don't do that. I know who's in that room more than they know themselves a lot of the time.
And even if you can't find them, because I'm a big believer in this, I think if you can get them to like you, if you get them into a position where they want you to get the job and they're looking for an excuse to give it you, rather than just letting your credentials do the talk. Because how many times can you have somebody come into a room, you're like, they're perfect, but just not feeling it.
Not feeling it.
Whereas you can be feeling it and they're not perfect, but you're like, do you know what? We can work with that, or we can work with this.
Yeah, no one likes to hear that people will take a punt on you, on your potential, if you make them feel good. People often are not trying to hire the perfect candidate when it comes to technical experience and ability, because very rarely does it exist. And I just think in this market, transferable skills are becoming more and more powerful and important. But if I couldn't find a single thing about you on the internet, which is honestly, like, you'd be really hard pressed.
Which is a bit of a red flag now, isn't it?
Yeah,
as well?
like, why are you working there? But if I couldn't find a single thing about you, I would, the hiring manager, whoever I'm liaising with on the phone to book the interview, I'd say, tell me about Josh. What can you tell me? What does he like? What does he hate? You know, what's his previous five hires had in common? Like, you have that resource there. They want you to get the job, otherwise they wouldn't waste their time shortlisting you. So I think it's a sales mentality of like uncovering every lead and opportunity, but being a bit more strategic with whoever it is that you're liaising with in the company goes a long way as well.
So you'd say that the kind of off-camera chats are as important as the on-camera chats. Do you know the chats that happen before you go, right, let's start?
Yeah.
They're just as important as what you're going to say.
Like how you email the recruiter or the hiring manager is so important. Like if you're just like really short and rude or slow to respond or lazy in your email responses, like that's a first impression. If you go into the campus, I just worked on the university. If you go into the office that day for your interview and you're a bit rude to the receptionist because you're feeling a bit nervous, it doesn't matter if you're nervous, don't care, you've been rude to the receptionist, and that's going to get back. People don't like that advice. They don't like to think that it's Big Brother. But we had a coffee shop over the road in my last role, and Jude was like absolutely everyone's favourite hero at Cafe Nero. I still speak to her today. She was amazing. And she'd say, oh, how did so-and-so get on this morning? And I'd say, how were they when they came and got coffee? Because they'd let on they were going for an interview, and she'd say, they were gorgeous, they were so nice, they were so chatty. Like, you could see they were nervous, but they still said hello and blah, blah, blah. And those tiny little bits of invisible PR go so far, and people don't like to hear that the person that's on the car park helping you get in, on the attendant, that they actually have a say too. And I've got trolled a lot for saying that on the internet, but I think it's because people don't realise how networked people really are.
I think people like to think that everything's done super, super professionally by the book, but ultimately most of life isn't.
Yeah.
Like, most jobs, they go to the person, as long as they can do it, they'll go lean towards the person they like the most, and you trust the most, and have rapport with.
I do think there's a lot of work to be done on interview processes. It's a very middle class process. Most people don't grow up learning how to speak in a way that is a panel of people. Most people don't have that chat. Most people don't have that access to the network. Most of us don't sit and have dinner at the dinner table every night and discuss politics. And I'm generalising, but the working class really, like, typically have not been included in the interview process in terms of its design. So I do think they need to reflect much more of an informal conversation, because that's when you get the best out of people. And I do think some people will perform significantly better in that environment now because they're so used to it. Whereas I meet young people who they could never comprehend that they might have to sit in front of 5 people and perform, and it's pressure and it's awkward, and they don't relate or look like any of the people sat in front of them. So I do think there's a long way to go so that people can feel maybe as relaxed as I can throughout my career. But that's an organisational change, and it's a big one.
So if you go into like no-nos a little bit, just one thing I wanted to suggest is, would you say if you went into an interview and you were open about the fact that you were considering other options is a no-no, or do you think you'd be better acting as if this is your tunnel vision on the role? So almost playing hard to get, or acting as if you're all in, even if you're not?
I give advice on this, and I speak from my own experience, which is sometimes wrong because a lot of people lack the confidence that I have in that scenario. When you're desperate for a job and you're actually desperate for this job, I can understand the value of saying, this is the only one for me. But you lose all leverage then. So say you're the right candidate and then they offer you 5k less than what was advertised because you've let on that you're bloody desperate. Well, that job might not even be the right fit for you anyway, because you might need to earn 25k and they've only offered you 20. So I would say always make the inference that you're in a couple of processes. You don't have to explicitly say, I'm interviewing here, here and here. And they probably will ask you, are you interviewing anywhere else? And you say, I'm in a couple of processes. And they say, who for? Because they like to know the competitor set. And you say, I'd prefer not to say it this time. That's not bad going. And even if you're not in any processes, you kind of are. It's not a full lie, because you are in processes. If you're applying for things, you might not get far along. So it's having these little anecdotes rehearsed and prepared so that when you are asked awkward questions, you can say, oh, I am actually in a couple of processes at the moment, but this is the one that I quite want the most. You can say you're passionate about it, but I would always make out like I'm in high demand. I still do it now.
And if we come away from the interview process and we look at career as a whole, what would be your tips for progressing for a company as fast as possible?
Taking on more. And everyone is like, work smart, don't work hard. But I don't think you learn how to work smart until you've worked hard. I think you have to understand hard before you can average your day in a way that allows it to be smart. But I've always taken on more responsibility before I ever asked for the promotion, and I think people do it the wrong way around. I have people come to me that say, well, I've been here 3 years and I'm doing an alright job, so it's time for a promotion. It's just not how it's going to work. It doesn't work that way. So in terms of progressing through your career, I think doing those extras and being visible. Perception is reality at work, and people don't like to hear that either. You could be doing a brilliant job very quietly in the corner, but if you're not advocating for yourself and no one else is, you may as well not bother. There's no point. So learning a bit more about social capital and currency, and how to sort of amplify the work that you're doing and put a spotlight on yourself and maybe the team around you so it doesn't feel as boastful. Those are the things that propel your career above and beyond the person that comes in, does a really good job every day, but no one knows about it. Would you say then
that would you say it's a myth that keep your head down, work hard, and the cream will rise to the top?
The keep your head down bit, absolutely. Work hard, the cream will rise to the top, but keeping your head down, that's what like someone wants to say to keep you down. I think, an old school CEO saying, keep your head down, work hard. Well, you're not going to remember me if I do that. So I'll work hard, but I'm going to do something memorable in conjunction with it. I think keep your head down is like what people do to keep you in a position, and most companies don't want you to progress too far because then you might be asking for more money, or you might be going elsewhere. So always be your own advocate and know that you don't owe a company anything, even if it's a family-run business. I'm not being funny, but if they made redundancies tomorrow, you're going to be the first to go over their son, daughter, niece and nephew that work there. So you have to act that way. Act a bit more selfishly. It's not as everyone used to for a long time, especially in Manchester, family-run culture, family-orientated culture, blah, blah, blah. But it's just, they're not your family. I'm not working with my cousins.
What would you say then to somebody that doesn't like the idea of keeping their options open, and they believe the best way to get to the top of their career is to stick with one company? They're not keeping their head down, they're working hard, and they're going to wait at it. What would be would you say that can be the best route, or should you always have your options open and be increasing your value to be attractive elsewhere as well as where they are currently?
So let's say you go with scenario one, you keep your head down. No, you work hard, but you put your head above the parapet and say, by the way, I'm doing good work. Okay, all that is gorgeous, but 5 years from now that company goes bust and you've done absolutely nothing to advocate for yourself. You have immediately put yourself in a very vulnerable position. It's unrealistic to think that you would be able to work for a company for 30 years anymore, because industries change. The statistics on companies that fail is crazy. The statistics on the value of moving companies every X amount of years and the influence that has on your salary is similarly crazy, but to the advantage of yourself. So I know that there are people out there that the thought of networking, advocating for themselves, self-promoting is disgusting. And if they can make peace with the fact that they're not building a plan B for themselves and that they might earn pay rises and promotions at a much slower rate than their counterpart, if they're at peace with that, then that is absolutely the right thing for them to do. But I just don't think that is a realistic reflection of the workplace that we're in at the moment.
Often as well, and I've not been in the corporate world for a while, but I find it fascinating because you will have companies that I've heard of before where you almost have to leave to come back and get the promotion that you wanted if you stayed there.
I've done that.
Why do you think that is? Why, because I suppose one thing that people don't realise or don't think about is the people at the top, or CEOs or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
They're just human beings as well, aren't they?
Yeah.
So they will often only realise your value sometimes when you're leaving.
I'm provoked with it. Yeah.
So would you say that basically it's very rare that you're going to progress quicker staying in one place?
Mm-hmm.
Would you say it's always the case where you should be moving and leapfrogging around?
I don't think you can progress. It depends on how quickly the company is that you're going with. People would join in an interview and they'd say, what does progression look like? What would my next job be? And we were like a startup. So the answer was, if you work well and we get on and we do well as a business, then really you're an early adopter and your next role could be a bloody big one. But like, no one wants to have that belief because it's a big risk, isn't it? So I think people again have like this utopia on progression and how prescriptive companies can be with that next promotion. I've known promotions be lined up for 10 people and be taken away the month after because the business was failing. Businesses and the big CEOs operate on the basis of keeping costs lowest is the easiest way to keep businesses growing. I know you have to invest, and I'm not talking about scale, but keeping an employee's salary at 30,000, not thinking, oh, if we give them another 5 in 6 months, we'll probably stay. That's not where people are at. They're keeping their costs down, especially in this market. And so when you confront someone with the fact that you're going to resign, that's when they think, oh shit. And people don't realise the cost of replacing you. The cost of replacing you is time, money. You might not find someone. You might have to go through a recruiter. The new person that you get might then be shit and they might leave, so that costs you again. That might cause you reputational damage. It might cause damage to your revenue. So they don't realise the impact of a knock-on of losing a really great hire until you confront them with it a lot of the time.
So they start that process again and realise, actually, I've got a lot of work to do here.
Yeah, and I've accepted counter offers before, and you have to make peace with, if you do that, then everything that pissed you off before is going to continue to piss you off. And was you leaving because you weren't happy with your pay, or was you leaving because of other reasons? And that's what I say to people. I've had a counter offer. It's 10k more. My new job was 10k more, but I think I'll stay where I am because I know it. Well, they didn't value you before you were threatening to leave, so what makes you think they'll value you after they've added 10k in your salary? They'll just expect more.
What advice would you give to people that are in a company and they Well, in fact, let's just change it. So, what advice would you give to somebody that's in a company and they want to pay a rise? Quite simply, how would you approach that? And let's assume this person probably deserves it.
Yeah.
They've if they hired somebody new, they'd probably pay them that wage.
Yeah.
And they've just been left at a lower wage because they know they can get away with it. How would you approach that?
Yeah, so on the assumption that it's a rational thing that you want a pay rise and that you've done some market research to benchmark yourself against what you should be earning, I would just approach it very frankly. So you're my manager. I would say, Josh, I'd really like to put some time in the diary this week to discuss my pay rise and progression within the company. And you'd say, okay, Tuesday at 3. Your job is, you're responsible for my progression and you're paid more for it. So I'm not putting you out of I'm not inconveniencing you by asking you to sit down with me as your direct report. We sit down. Josh, I've really enjoyed my time here over the last 2 years. As you can see, we've worked together so well. I've achieved some key milestones, A, B, C, D, and E. I put together a bit of a deck if you want to have a look through it. I just wondered, what bandwidth do we have for progression or a pay rise in the next 6 months? Or how can you influence my progression and pay with, senior leadership team? So I make sure that my value is reflected in what I'm taking home, or what would it look like for me to get a promotion in the next 3 months? Like asking open questions, not saying, can I have a promotion? Because that's yes or no. Not saying, Dave next door is earning 10 grand more than me. I don't care. Dave's worth is no reflection on your own. What Dave might be the company's nephew. Like, you just don't know. He might be married to the chairman's daughter. Like, you don't know. Don't go in with that attitude. Go in with your own awareness of your self-worth and contribution and put a business case forward. You shouldn't have to, but it's the easiest way to stop people from saying no. If you're not going to say no to me, I tell you now, because I'm coming in with all of the things that I've done that have added value to you, and it highlights the fact that if I leave, you lose that. And so asking you what's the timescales or the bandwidth or the likelihood, or how can you as my manager advocate for me for a pay rise, they're open questions and it's your role to do so. If you know that budgets are tough and you push back to me and say, Izzy, I tell you now, there's a pay freeze. They're not going to promote you for 6 months. Is that okay? Do we need to have a conversation? You have to make the decision as the individual. 6 months isn't that long. I do enjoy my time here. I'm going to wait and see what happens. Or you have to say, I need more pay now. I'm ready for it. I'm going to look elsewhere. You cannot sit in the middle once you get the answer you want. You have to make a decision.
You need to, I mean, what I've taken from that right away is you've almost started the chat a little bit informal and not back them into a corner.
Yeah.
You're building a case, so that's preparation, and you've took emotion out of it as well.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, as a business owner myself, being in those situations on the other side, it's not appealing to me when somebody wants a pay rise because they just think, I've been here for a while.
Oh, that's the worst reason.
To me, if you've been here for a month or 10 years,
it's
all about the value and what you bring to the table.
And similarly, coming to me and saying, I need a pay rise because my mortgage has gone up and my partner's left me, so my bills are higher. Honestly, they're valid reasons to want one, but they're not enough reason for a company to pay you more because they don't care. They're not a charity.
And if that's the case, that's fine, as long as you now build a case on why you've
Your
got more value and why now that can translate into more money or some other kind of perk. And then the other thing as well is I think ultimately finding out if the budget's there, which I know some people don't like the question, especially in sales, what's your budget? But I think it's very valid when if a company isn't actually making the money to pay higher wages, it's good for you to know, because then you can actually then go and, rather than banging the door down 6 months later, actually now to start working on plan B.
Yeah, and if someone is making redundancies en masse, honestly, read the room. Like, a lot of people don't read the room. We'll have like a town hall and the CEO will update, like, things are tough. Business really needs to pull together. We need to restructure a bit, and you need to be really careful with budgets if you're a budget holder. And then someone will come to me the next day and be like, so, promotion. I've been here 2 years, and I'm like, oh my God.
It goes back to people thinking again about, all that's irrelevant. I deserve a pay rise.
Yeah, exactly.
So
context is really important.
Yeah.
And do you know what? Some companies will not be able to give you a pay rise because they don't have the budget or they don't want to. And that is actually, a lot of the time, it's not personal at all. It's just you need to move on.
But you need to hear that sometimes, where I think you actually just want to know from them that we would actually give you one if we could afford it, and knowing that we would but we can't now allows you to make a decision based on that, doesn't it?
That just, in my mind, that just makes me think, all right, I'm definitely getting off them.
But at least now you can. It's not they don't think you deserve one. It's literally that company's not growing at the same level.
Yeah, yeah.
And then and I think from what I've taken so far is, if you're not leaving your options open, it's a disadvantage in any point, whether you're running a business yourself. Like, it reminds me a little bit of, as a business owner, the kind of people that would say they'd never sell the business. For me, and it's fair enough if you want to build a lifestyle business, don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
I feel like you should always have one ear listening. Do you know what I mean?
100%,
Like for
yeah.
me, nothing's ever off the table.
Yeah.
If you offer me 10 million for one of my businesses that's worth 100 grand, why am I
Yeah.
not going to take that if I love
Yeah.
it or not?
Yeah.
So I feel like same with careers, but I think one thing that I've realised as well over the years, I think when I was growing up, you think every business is here forever, and you said it before
Yeah.
that so many
It's
go bust.
alarming.
What would, like, I think my parents certainly would have told me that get a safe job.
Yeah.
Would you say now that working in a big corporate, especially in a high up role, which are often the first to kind of get cut if
Yeah.
the company's struggling,
Yeah.
would you say it's safer still than having your own business? Or would you say that business is safer because at least it's in your own hands? And I know the context of the business matters because every business is
Yeah, the
different, but
industry.
generally, is it still much safer to have a job, or is it safer to be in control of your own destiny?
I would always say do both, and a lot of people would tell me you don't have the time to do both, but I managed to find the time, and I'm really, really stretched at the moment. I'm still making the time, but I keep seeing a meme that's going around at the moment that says the job market is so tough that I just started following my dreams. I think like that's so important. Like if you have a dream that you can influence and impact yourself, then you should do that concurrently whilst job hunting or in a job. I forget your question now.
Which is safer, business or a career?
Do you know the thing that it was Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is such a wanky book to recommend, but it's been such a fundamental read in my life around financial
I
education.
agree. Not necessarily what it's about, but the kind of
just the mechanisms of it, and it's very American. It's quite dated now, so it's not really completely relevant. In principle, it's very, very good. But one of the things that completely like floored me, I read it quite young, was that when you hire yourself, even if it's a freelance or a lifestyle business, whatever it is, you know the bank balance, you know where you're at, you know if you can afford to pay yourself the next month or the month after that, and that can be really hard, and it can be really amazing because it's transparency. When you work for a business, you have no clue really at any point in time when they can afford to pay you or not the month thereafter. So if transparency is what's important to you, then I would argue working for yourself is the best thing in the world. And I always say job security is a myth, and I used to think working in a company was job security 100%, but nothing is guaranteed. So you either take the risk on yourself, but you might struggle a bit financially, but you know where things are, or you take the risk on a company where you don't really know where the finances are. Different things work for different people at a different point in their lives, as you probably know from being self-employed. Getting a mortgage or even getting a rental agreement when you're self-employed is harder than when you're employed. There are values to both sides of things, but I think a lot of people are clocking on to like digital nomad lives and like having more flexibility to work from wherever you want and so on and so forth. And that leniency comes with investing in your own stuff, I think, above and beyond being able to work for a really cool brand like Monzo, who have quite a good level of flexibility on remote working. It depends entirely what your priorities are.
Yeah, and I think as well people are becoming more aware now that the value of a job isn't about just the money.
Yeah.
There's the flexibility, there's the potential for growth, there's the security. Because obviously some jobs can be really secure, but the company will probably be the same place in 20 years, which is great in one way because it's here, but in another way it's not, because your role's not really going to grow unless somebody leaves.
Yeah.
So there's positives and negatives to everything. And how would you describe the situation you're in right now with your career and where you're at? Like what does your day in day out look like at the minute?
People that are sat on boards now have portfolio careers, so they'll have a non-exec director role on this board, and they might do some advisory work here. That's what has traditionally been called as a portfolio career, but I am taking that as my own thing now. So I have a portfolio career now. I work for the overlap 3 days a week. It tends to permeate a bit more in my other stuff, but 3 days a week I'm in the office for the overlap or on set. That is meetings all day because I only work 3 days, so I fit in as many meetings as I can, whether that's with clients, prospective clients, or my colleagues. So that's a jam-packed day. I don't stop at all. I like it. I hate watching the clock, so it absolutely flies by. My other 2 days are looking after my daughter and/or plus always speaking engagements, consultancy engagements, my TikTok and corporate Agony Ant stuff, building a business model to sit behind that. I do a lot of like LinkedIn sales training in person. So I used to think I'd have this like one SKU, this one vertical for my products that was the only thing I was ever going to offer. But actually I've really learnt the art of throwing enough shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. And if I can monetize it, that's what I do. So I was ghostwriting for quite a while as well on my days off. I stopped enjoying that, so I stopped doing it. So I'm just like flexing my portfolio career and seeing where I end up. But where I end up at the end of this year will probably be different to the year after and the year after that. So I don't have a fixed outlook on what my jobs are and what my career are. I'm kind of going with the flow.
Are you a better speaker or a better writer?
I think I'm a better speaker because there are a lot of people that are really good at writing, very, very, very good technical copywriters. I try and write how I speak, whereas a lot of people know how to optimise for different audiences better than I would. But why I think I'm a better speaker is because no matter what I do, before I've even spoken, I'm the loudest girl in the room. I'm tall, I'm confident, I'm mixed race, I've got size 9 feet, and you can hear me coming. So I just have learnt to leverage that loud in a way that I know that I am memorable. I know that I meet someone once and they'll say that they know me, and it's partly because of how I present myself, but I know I try my best to make people feel good, and I think that always comes through when I do my public speaking. Well, I like to think so.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I've got 2 questions to finish off with.
Mhm.
You can make them as long or as short, the
I'll go
answers as you
short.
like. We'll see, you've not heard them first. You've not heard them yet. What advice would you give to yourself at 18 years old, looking back at where you were then, from yourself now?
18, first year of uni. I'd try and enjoy university a bit more than I did. I think I was like always quite serious with my studying, and the first year doesn't even count for anything. So, but I'd had strict parents, and education was always like a really.
So you were pretty switched on at that time.
Yeah,
and knew
yeah.
it,
Education was always really an important thing, and the thought of messing up a year of uni, it was never going to be me. I was like teacher's pet, but I struggled with my exams.
But if you were quite serious and obviously you're focused on your work, was you still a brilliant networker then, or was you? So you were still doing that. Because
I wasn't building like senior networks.
No, but I mean, like, when I say network, I mean getting to know people.
Oh yeah.
Like being well known on the campus, making loads of friends. Was you still doing that, even not getting involved maybe so much in the nightlife?
Yeah, I was still going out, don't get me wrong, but I think I could have just put a little bit less pressure on myself, especially in the first year, because it wasn't that important. But you know, there's another meme that's going around at the moment that's like, have you ever met someone and you can just tell they had an active role on campus? Like, I am the epitome of that. But yeah, 18-year-old me, I'd say, firstly, it's not that serious. Secondly, you're probably going to be working for 50 to 60 years, so just chill out and enjoy yourself. You don't have to have a big corporate job when you finish university. I think when you finish university, if you don't get a big grad scheme, you feel like a failure. But in actual fact, I'm absolutely buzzing that I've kind of only ever done SMEs.
Did you feel like you was in a competition at that stage to kind of have a really fast and good start?
Yeah, but I'm only ever competing with myself. Genuinely, like my friend who I live with, Sarah, she was doing Disney and getting really good grad schemes, and I was never envious. I was always buzzing for her. I was just competing with myself and like to impress my parents. And I've got 2 younger sisters, so if anyone I was competing against, it was to make sure I outran them too. Whereas now all I'm ever trying to do is bring them up with me. But at the time, I thought I'm going to be the best grandchild of all.
And next question and last question. What does retirement look like to you? And you can take that
That's a
however you
good
want.
question.
Like, it doesn't. Like,
Mhm.
I've had a couple of people start to say that they're not going to retire, and I don't necessarily mean that. Your
No.
retirement can be you're never fully retiring, but
Yeah.
like I almost want you to close your eyes and picture what that looks
I'll
like
picture it
and
all
tell
the time,
me.
don't
Yeah.
have to close them. By the time I'm 32 now, so by the time I'm 40, I want work to be a real choice. I want to choose projects that I enjoy, drop projects that I don't. I want it to be a choice. So financial freedom is like my big goal for the next 8 years, which sounds like a really long time, but it's how quickly does time go by? So if I hit financial freedom by 40, then that for me means I could retire for a year and then go back to work, or retire for 50 and it's not a problem. So I don't have a fixed view of like moving to Spain when I'm 65 years old. I just know that I want more financial freedom so that I can travel the world with my family, and I'm working on that now in full transparency. So 3 years from now, the plan is that my daughter will be homeschooled so that we can go and live in Thailand for a year or Bali for a year, and everything that I build in will allow me to have a fully remote career. And my partner will have the same, because I just think there's more of the world I want to see, and I have no regrets on how I live my life today. But if I can live the travelling era that I never got, because I started a job the day I handed in my dissertation, and I can give that experience to my children, and I'm a bit disappointed now by mainstream education, so I don't want to follow what everyone else is doing. If I can start that in 3 years, and I'll already feel like I'm on my retirement path, because that won't feel like work to me. The stuff I do on the side does not feel like work. I enjoy it so much that it's so intrinsically rewarding and financially rewarding, that I could probably do it forever. But that doesn't mean I want to say I want to work forever either.
Yeah, because obviously your path so far sounds like it's been unpredictable
Yeah.
year on year. So what you're really saying is you just like the freedom to choose when you're at retirement.
Choice.
You like to just be able to not have to work, not have to
Yeah.
earn money. You're just doing whatever is exciting you at the time.
I used to wear this hoodie that said "rich by 30" on it because I just wanted to be rich. I wanted to be on a certain salary by 30. This is like I was like maybe 25. Rich by 30. It was a Sisters and Seekers jumper, like one of the earliest ones, and they're flying that brand now. They're really impressive. And then I got to 30 and I was doing really well. And I was like, oh, do you know what? I just love some time. I just love some time back. So now all of my perception of wealth is health. Like health, people around me that are so poorly, all they ever want is to feel healthy. So health is like, it's a complete perspective that I have all the time. I see what goes on in the news and it can take me out of my ways for days. So the fact that I have a roof over my head and I'm healthy and I'm happy, like that for me is absolute wealth. And that's not a cop-out because I'm not a millionaire yet. It's just genuinely how I feel yet. But I also just think that time is so valuable, and until you've given loads of it up, you don't realise. And some people enjoy filling their time with work and they'll take that to the grave with them. But I have seen different aspects of life and I don't want to spend all my time working.
I think you only realise how important time is as you get older because the time seems to speed up, doesn't it?
I'm 32.
So
I'm just a baby. I don't understand.
so like when you was in school, it just felt like a school year was literally what 10 years feels like now.
Yeah, and when you was at school, you were like, God, I can't wait to be 25. Why? For what reason? Now I'm like, God, I wish I was 25 again. Well, I don't. I also think like growing older is such a blessing. Like the opposite of growing older is passing away or being really unhealthy. So like every year that comes by, I especially think your 30s are like just you typically wealthier, you're happier, you know who your friends are. You're not going to meet like 100 new friends now. The ones you've got, you need to lock in because that work on those friendships. Where else are you meeting people? So like I really like my 30s because in my mind this is like I'm really unapologetically myself, have very little patience for people that aren't in my inner circle, and that people pleasing era of my 20s is like slipping away really quickly, thank God. So bring on your 30s if you're worried about it. It's the best time.
And where can people find you? Where's the best place to find you?
Instagram and TikTok is at Corporate Agony Aunt, and then LinkedIn is Isabel Panton. Very formal.
Izzy, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it a lot. Thank you.